Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Brian. Today we're going to be working on our 2007 GMC Acadia. Took it in for inspection and they barely passed it for the front brake rotors and pads. They said the brake rotors were below thickness and the pads were just over the line of passing. Plus it has a pretty good brake shake, brake surge. I've been hearing complaints about it for months, so now we'll address it. I have new pads and rotors to go on, so let's go. Start with, we'll take the bolt out that holds the caliper on the caliper sliding pin. That's a 13. We'll take top and bottom. Some cars you can, if you're changing brake pads, you can sometimes pivot the caliper out of the way by leaving the other one in. Since we're changing the rotor, the whole thing's got to go on this one. You want to support that caliper and not let it hang by the hose. That should be fine. So that pad's about shot. And this one does not want to come out. I don't know if it'll show up. This little metal tab right here, when it gets down to where it's almost gone, that'll start scraping against the caliper and it'll give you the telltale ring that your brakes are about gone. So there was some life left on that. Next, let's measure and see how thin this rotor really is. This isn't the ideal tool for this, but it should work as long as I can get around this lip that's worn on the outside here. So we're about the 0.2. So we were right there, 25, 26, 27, 27.2. Regardless, I wouldn't want to resurface these as rusty as they are. Next, we'll take this caliper bridge off. This is a 21 millimeter bolt, and it's probably going to be tight. And they have red Loctite from the factory. I turned the key on and just left the key, turned it back off and left it in it. That way I can manipulate the steering, get some better access. There's a torque screw that holds the rotor on. I'm not good at guessing those sizes. That one's a T30. That seemed to be the closest fit. This shouldn't be super tight, but it can get corroded in there. Luckily, living in the South, this vehicle is super rusty and it's been here its whole life too. I searched around the parts stores. They wanted about $80 a rotor. I found this entire set of Powerstop pads and rotors, clips, all that, for like $80 something on Amazon. just knock this rust off. If you don't have access to this kind of equipment, this is just an angle grinder, cheap Harbor Freight one with a Scotch-Brite disc. A wire brush would probably be fine to knock that off. Rotor slides on, line up your hole for your torque screw to hold the rotor on. Little anti-seize isn't a bad idea sometimes on these. And your car may be missing this because these used to have a tendency to get frozen in there and strip out, and you would have to drill them out, and they never got replaced when that happened. I mean, the wheel actually holds the rotor on. This is more of a convenience feature, but it does make it nice when everything works right. There are new clips with the new pads, so these can come out of here. We'll just run a wire brush in here. They're really not greasy or dirty, just have brake dust on them. So now that the rotor's on, this caliper bridge can go back on. Ideally, you could apply more Loctite, but I've never had a problem with them coming out. Ideally, when you have the ability, it's nice to torque things to the right spec, which on this case is 129 foot-pounds. Next up, the little clip hardware. As I recall, they are all the same. So they just kind of pop in to the caliper bridge. These are Powerstop's ceramic pads that came in the kit. Let's make sure they're going to fit. Okay, they will fit. I've had problems with these clips getting bent and them not wanting to go in right. This little spring right here actually holds the pad away from the disc, so when you're not on the brakes, it's not riding on it, and it keeps it from rattling and making noise. Before I go any further, we'll hit it with some brake clean. Front and back. I've had this can of disc brake quiet for like 20 years. It's just a little dab where the caliper or where the pads slide in the bridge will keep it from rattling and keep it from rusting up. Wherever the caliper actually pushes on the pad, I like to put a little bit there too, even though it has these little anti-vibration, anti-squeal dampers on them. And the back pad goes in the same way. I'll put a little bit of that on the back surface where the piston contacts the pad. Now that the pads are on there, you can see how those little spring clips kind of push them back out of the way. Now, we need to push these pistons back so the caliper will actually fit on. So use whatever means you have to push that piston back. Here's how I was always taught to do it. Crack the brake caliper, bleeder loose. I think it looks a little rusty. Let's hope it will crack loose. Yes. I'm not going to go any more than that. That way, when you squeeze this back, you're not squeezing fluid back through the brake system. And you could potentially overflow the reservoir, or you could damage the master cylinder, so I've been told. So I always try to err on the side of caution. I have this rather large pair of channel locks. That's what I always used. And try not to make too much of a mess. So we'll let that drip for a minute, and that should push any air that got in there out. Go ahead and shut it for now. Shoot a little of this DBQ on these pistons. Now the caliper should slide right on. Make sure your caliper pins, make sure they're free and move fine. They do. And they have a flat side, so make sure they're turned the right way, or the caliper won't go back on. There we go. Now the bolts that hold the caliper to the bridge can go back on. The torque spec for the caliper to bridge bolts is 30 foot-pounds. One thing I neglected to show before we started on the other side is how to check your rotors to see how much runout they have or how warped they are. I have a dial indicator on a magnetic base, so it sticks to something magnetic, and then you can adjust this arm however many ways you want to, and then it'll tighten everything down and hold it in position. This is an El Cheapo eBay one, but then you can fine-tune the adjustment down here. So we'll start with 0. Try to get it close to 0. Then let's turn the rotor, see how much it moves. So it looks like we're about 4 thousandths right there. So we're 4 to 5 thousandths of run out. What that doesn't tell me though is what the other side's doing at the same time. So this rotor could actually be getting wider, narrower, wider, and it adds up. So what adds up to that side, what run out it has. So it could be walking like this, or it could be doing this. So we'll see. It could be the rears too, but according to the specs, the maximum allowable run out is 2 thousandths. So go ahead and get this side done, and then we'll recheck it when I have it all together and see what it shows. So this is kind of amusing. Looks like the run out on this rotor is worse than the old one. But let me put some lug nuts on there and make sure it's pulled all the way down. Went ahead and installed 3 lug nuts on here to make sure the rotor was pulled down all the way. So it looks like new ones are about 2000s. Now the other one the old one I hadn't pulled it down with the lug nuts, but I hadn't taken the screw out, so I believe it was all the way seated. So anyway, now I need to find somebody to help me bleed the brakes. Go ahead and press down, hold it, up, down, hold, up, down, up, down. Okay, let me go to the other side. All right, pump it up. Does it feel hard?
Yes.
Okay, we're done. Don't forget to torque your wheels to 140 foot-pounds. I read it inside the cap, so I don't have to look it up. Don't forget to top off your brake fluid. I probably didn't need to in this case, but I believe next time we do brakes on this, we'll suck all that out and kind of change the brake fluid. I think rear brakes are probably coming up next because I've never done them on this car. I think that is the 3rd set of rotors I've put on, and in 250,000 miles I don't consider that bad. I didn't notice it till the end, but Powerstop included the installation guide, and also brake-in procedure. 5 aggressive decelerations from 40 to 10, and 5 moderate from 35 to 5, and then 5 minutes cool down. So we'll go out and try to get as close to that as possible. So that stops way better than it did. There's still a little bit of shake. I think that may be because of the rear pads and rotors. And they're about shot anyway, so that'll be coming up soon. So now we just do a couple moderately aggressive slowdowns. I think it said 35 to 5, and then let it cool for 5 minutes before we stop. What you really don't want to do is hit them hard and then come to a stop and sit there and hold your foot on the brakes. And that comes for really any time you're driving. You don't want to really come to a stoplight where you really have to jam on the brakes. What I like to do is, if I do have to do that, is once I've stopped, is I'll let off the brake pedal and roll forward a little bit, and that way you're not clamping a hot brake pad on the same spot on the rotor. So that's how to install front brake pads and rotors on your 1st generation GMC Acadia. That would likely be the same for all the other ones, Traverse, the Saturn one, whatever the other ones were, the Buick, that ugly Buick. So yeah, that would be pretty much the same thing. Next thing we need to do is the kit came with this Powerstop sticker. I've got to figure where I can put it on the vehicle and completely mortify my 16-year-old daughter. Thanks for watching. See you soon.